Socialism Part II. Let's begin with a discussion of rights and privileges. First, liberty is rights with responsibilities. Liberty, rights with responsibilities. It's the opposite of license. Liberty is freedom, but it's responsible freedom. License means anarchy. There are no rights, no rules, no privileges. The strong devour the weak. The powerful destroy the powerless. It's a dog-eat-dog world. The law of the jungle. It's the world of Antifa, the so-called anti-fascist, but what the A actually stands for is not anti-fascism, but actually anarchy. A right is a freedom, the freedom to act morally without asking for permission. If you have a right, you don't have to ask anyone for permission. It's your right to do it. You have the right to worship God. You don't have to ask anyone if you can worship God. You have the right of freedom of speech. You don't have to ask anyone if it's okay to say what you want to say. You just say it. And you have a right to keep and bear arms. You have a right to peacefully assemble. You have a right to petition. We have all kinds of rights that are given to us by God, and no man can take them away from us. This is characteristic of capitalist republics, where you have rights. Rights cannot be taken away by anyone. They're God-given. And so we have another concept, though, and that is a privilege. A privilege is the freedom to act morally, but only after permission has been granted by some government entity. This is exactly what the founding fathers of the United States, the founders of the United States, did not like. They did not want to live under a system where you had to have permission to worship, permission to speak, permission to bear arms, permission to worship, or to do anything that you wanted to do. So privileges can be taken away. And this is characteristic of socialist totalitarian regimes. Do you have freedom of religion in China, Venezuela, in Cuba, in Soviet Russia? Of course not. So the idea in socialism is that everything is a privilege and you do not have basic human rights. John Locke said that there are 3 basic human rights, and most capitalist democracies and republics are based on these ideas. First, everyone is entitled to live once they're created. So once you are conceived as life, you have the right to live. No one can take your life. Everyone is entitled to do as you please, just so it does not conflict with the first right, allowing other people to live. Secondly, everyone is entitled to own all that they create or gain through gift or trade, so long as it does not conflict with the first 2 rights. A beautiful system here from John Locke. And a lot of successful societies have been built on these basic ideas. You're entitled to what you earn. Now let's make some assumptions about human nature. First, all people consume equally. This is not true, but it's something we must assume. All people produce unequally. We know that's true, don't we? All people produce unequally, but we have to assume that they consume equally. For instance, 2 people go to a restaurant. One big old boy, he might eat steak, French fries, and want some more when he's through. Another smaller person may eat only half of his steak and be really full. But they both paid the same for their meal, the same meal. So the assumption is the restaurant has to make the assumption. They don't know who you are and how much you can eat. So they assume that you will consume equally, but you produce unequally when you work. And these are some assumptions we make. So let's say that we have a society of 7 people on an island somewhere, and it's just their own little world here. We'll create this world for our purposes. There are 7 people there. A, B, and C produce more than they consume. I don't know what these units are. Maybe they're food units, let's say. They're units of food. A produces 1,200 of them and consumes 500. Individual B consumes 750 and consumes 500. C produces 600 and eats 500 of them. Now we have other people in the society. That's 3 of our 7 people. So D, E, and F, they produce less than they they produce less than they consume. So they're consuming 500, but they're only producing 4, 3, or 250 of these items. An individual G is completely dependent on this, doesn't produce anything, and yet consumes 500. So this is our people do consume. They have needs. You have to have so many calories to live. And so in the society, it works out okay. They produce 3,500 and they consume 3,500. And so as long as individuals A, B, and C are willing to share with the others, that's fine. But you know how people are. They have these socialist ideas. And so let's see how this is going to work out. Let's first define some of our terms. A surplus is an excess of production over consumption, also defined as wealth. So here we have A producing 1,200 and consuming 700. So he has a surplus of how much? It would be a surplus of about 600, 700, surplus of 700. And so here's a deficit. That's a shortage of production over consumption. So here is person D has a 100 shortage. So that person has a deficit or a shortage of production over consumption of 100. So here we have a picture of what it actually was like. So these 3 people, A, B, and C, had a surplus. The others, D, E, F, and G, had a deficit. And so we had a surplus of 1,050, a deficit of 1,050. So we could say that really A, B, and C are supporting D, E, F, and G. A, B, and C are supporting the others in society because they're producing more. Now here's a question for you. Should G, who produced nothing, should G have the right to require the others to support him or her? Should G have the right to prevent them from leaving the island? Because if I'm working and you're taking all of my surplus, I'm working in self-interest here. I don't mind sharing with you a little bit, helping you survive, that's fine. But I don't think you have the right to force me to support you. So the real question is, do D, E, F, and G have the right to the surplus of A, B, and C? A, B, and C shared voluntarily with them, but do D, E, F, and G have a right to the surplus of A, B, and C? In other words, do D, E, F, and G have the right to steal the surplus from A, B, and C? Think of it as theft. The act of taking something that belongs to someone else. That's what socialism is. Socialism is taking from those who worked harder, those who produced, those who wisely invested, those who took a risk. They invested their savings in this business. They could have lost it all, but now they're reaping the benefits. Do you have a right to take their earnings and use it for yourself? Take from the rich and give to the poor. That's what socialism is. Now, year 2, let's see what happens in year 2. So we have these A, B, and C. Now they're only producing what they need to consume. What did they need to consume before? 500. So they needed 500 to live. They're producing only 500. That's natural. There's no incentive. If you're going to take what their surplus, why should they work harder than you do? So they're going to produce 500 for themselves. But now, as it turns out, D, E, and F and G are still not producing enough for themselves. And so it turns out that everybody only gets 350 units. 350 units might be enough to barely live, but it's certainly not the standard of living that they had in year one. So we can see here that socialism always produces poverty. Can you see this very clearly? Socialism, it's just in the math. It's always produces poverty. The incentive to work hard and produce is completely gone. Here's the picture of both years. So we see here in first year, there was 3,500 units produced. The second year, only 2,450 units produced. The surplus in the first year was 1,050 units. The surplus in the second year was only 500 units. And that was enough to give everyone 350 units instead of having everyone with 500 units. Can you see the poverty that is already taking place after 1 year of socialism? Now we know that a lot of preachers and a lot of socialists take Acts chapter 4 and verses 34 and 35 and use that as evidence that socialism is scriptural. And we read this: "Neither was there any among them that lacked, for as many as were possessors of lands or houses sold them, and brought the prices of the things that were sold, and laid them down at the apostles' feet. And distribution was made unto every man according as he had need." Now notice here that they sold what they had and gave it to the apostles, and they distributed to everyone as they had need. Now, what was the motivation here? It was the Holy Spirit. Each person voluntarily brought what they had. The disciples, the apostles, did not take it from them. They did not command them to sell all that they had. It's just something they wanted to do. Isn't it a great thing to sell what you have and give to the poor? Yes, but you don't have to. The government certainly doesn't have to tell you that. The church doesn't even tell you that. But you can if you want, if you're moved by the Holy Spirit, and we should as Christians. We have an obligation, really, to share with the poor, do we not? It's a very great part. Giving alms to the poor is a wonderful thing. And true religion undefiled, according to James chapter 1, is to take care of the widows and the orphans. Very clear. But great things like the Tulsa Dream Center, all the great charities that we have, Feed the Children, all these things are wonderful. Operation Blessing and so on. They do so much, but it's not the government's job to do it. The church should be taking care of the poor, not the government. And notice the church wasn't taking this away from the people. The government wasn't taking away from them. It was of their own free will that they gave to these people. And so in the United States, Tax Freedom Day is the first day each year that Americans work for themselves, because Americans work for the United States government until April 24th. It's May 14th in New York because they have a lot of state taxes. In anthropology, we call this corvée, forced labor. Forced labor. So you're working for the government until April 24th every year. That's your income taxes. If your income taxes were taken out, now you take income taxes out of every check all year long. But if they took out your income taxes only and you got no pay out of any of your checks, you wouldn't get any money for yourself until April 24th. That's how much taxes we pay. Now here's something. 48% of Americans of working age pay $0 in income taxes. So 48% of Americans pay 0 income taxes. The top 20% of Americans of working age pay 82% of all taxes. So the top 52% of Americans of working age pay 100% of all the taxes in the United States. And people say, the socialists claim, that the rich aren't paying their fair share. Well, the top 20% of Americans are already paying 82% of all taxes. What more do you want? How tight are you going to squeeze the people? The top 52% are paying 100% of all the taxes. The bottom 48% are paying zero taxes. Look at this. Is this fair? Aren't they making some money? Shouldn't they pay some taxes? Well, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe you don't think so. But let's not squeeze any more from the top, and let's not say that the system is not fair. Let's take a look at two examples. One is capitalism. This is Singapore in the Asian area. Singapore is the most open economy in the world, the seventh least corrupt economy in the world. It's the most pro-business economy with the lowest tax rates in the world. It's the third highest per capita gross domestic product in the world. This is according to the World Bank. Now, according to CNN, there's another country called Venezuela in South America. They have 300 billion barrels of oil reserves, more oil than Saudi Arabia. Venezuela is running out of food. The hospitals are overcrowded with sick children. Doctors don't have enough medicine or x-ray machines. Electricity isn't guaranteed. It goes off and on all the time. The only thing Venezuela has is chaos. This is socialism in practice. Socialism, they say they want no borders. They don't want us to keep people out of the United States. Borderless society. Now, I think with diseases, such as coronavirus, Ebola, and so on, maybe you should restrict people from coming in. But this is okay. No borders, okay, fine. But what is it about this? So capitalism is so unpopular that it has to build walls to keep people out. Socialism is so popular, it had to build walls to keep people in. I think capitalism is popular. Socialism is unpopular. People aren't thinking straight when they want socialism. The Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall, those were to keep people in. People were trying to escape from Soviet Russia and trying to escape from China and from Cuba. They came over from Cuba in boatloads. From when Vietnam went communist, after the United States pulled out, the boat people came, many of them perished, trying to escape socialism. Have a happy day.